The dust in the late 1870s was a different color. In the Arizona and New Mexico territories, it was not the soft brown of plowed eastern fields. It was red. It was a fine, penetrating grit that stained wagon canvas, settled in the creases of a man's eyes, and made every swallow of water taste of iron and time. This land lived in a state of held breath. The drought had lasted 3 years. The creeks were dry washes, the grasses were pale ghosts, and the great sacred rivers had shrunk, pulling back from their banks to expose cracked mud flats that looked like weeping sores. Into this parched world, the railroad came. It was a black iron scar, laid down with sweat and dynamite. Pushing west, with the railroad came the miners, chasing rumors of silver. And with the miners came the security men, hired by the railroad and the syndicates, who saw the land not for what it was, but for what it was worth. Tension was the only thing that flowed freely. It ran between the miners in their canvas camps, the railroad crews, and the Apache, whose ancestral lands held the silver and, more importantly, the last of the water. Men spoke in low voices in the tent saloons, the talk always circling back to 2 things: the suffocating grip of the railroad security and the shadow of Red Jack. Red Jack and his gang were a rumor made real by sporadic, brutal violence. They hit payrolls, they raided prospectors, but the whispers said they were more than simple outlaws. The whispers said they worked with the corrupt security men, clearing the land of anyone the railroad deemed an inconvenience. It was on the edge of this brittle world, on a high, narrow track overlooking a sheer drop, that Dr. Eleanor Hart found herself stranded. She pulled back on the reins, her voice a low, firm command to the mule. "Whoa, whoa, Ezekiel!" The mule, Ezekiel, paid her no mind. He was an animal of profound stubbornness, and he had chosen this precise, God's forsaken, this precise, inconvenient spot to stop. The left front wheel of her wagon, a sturdy buckboard laden with medical supplies, books, and canvas tenting, was jammed against a wedge of granite. The wagon itself sat at a terrifying angle, its right side hanging over a dizzying expanse of nothing. 1,000 feet below, the dry bed of a canyon floor shimmered in the oppressive heat. Ellie Hart wiped the sweat and the red dust from her forehead with a sleeve already dark with grime. She was a woman of 28, which many back east considered nearly past hope, but she possessed a constitution that belied her polite upbringing. Her eyes were the color of faded denim, clear and assessing. She had come west not to find a husband, but to build. She was a qualified doctor, a title she had fought for, and she intended to establish a mobile infirmary, a school for the children of all communities, miner, settler, and native. "Ezekiel," she said again, her voice tight. "We must move. There are sick people in Silver Ford." The mule flicked one ear. He refused to budge. The heat was a physical weight. It must have been 110 degrees. She looped the reins and climbed down carefully from the wagon seat, her heavy skirts catching on the brake lever. She landed on the narrow track, the rock wall hot against her back, the abyss breathing on her right. She surveyed the wheel. It was well and truly stuck. She would have to unload the heavier crates, push the wagon back, and then try to lead Ezekiel around the rock. It would take at least an hour. She was leaning down to unlatch the first aid trunk when the sound cracked through the air. It was not a boom. It was a sharp, flat crack, the sound of a powerful rifle. The bullet struck the cliff face 10 feet ahead of her, sending a shower of stone chips and red powder cascading down. Ellie froze. She did not scream or faint. She simply stopped, her hand hovering over the latch. She was a practical woman. Someone was shooting. They were either a terrible shot or they were warning her. She scanned the opposite ridge, a kilometer distant, seeing nothing but shimmering rock and skeletal ocotillo. She looked up. A man stood 20 yards up the track. He had not been there a second ago. He had not made a sound. He seemed to have materialized from the heat waves themselves, a figure of buckskin in shadow. He was Apache. His black hair was held back by a simple band, and his features were stark, defined by the high, harsh country. He held a Winchester rifle, and he held it with an ease that spoke of it being an extension of his arm. He was not aiming it at her. It was pointed at the sky, resting lightly in his grip. He was Nada in the white world. When he had been forced to interpret at the forts, they called him Nate. He was a man caught between the memory of his people's ways and the relentless crush of the new world. His duty was to the river, the sacred spring that gave life, the spring he knew this woman was unwittingly driving toward. He saw the land in a way she could not. He saw the subtle shift in the dust on the track, the faint indentation of shod hooves where no rider should be, the glint of a discarded cartridge near the bend. He had not fired to scare her. He had fired to stop her. Nate raised one hand, palm flat, a signal to halt. Ellie straightened, her heart a heavy, slow drum. She did not reach for the small pistol she kept under the wagon seat. She was a healer. She would not meet a warning with a threat. "I mean no harm," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Nate remained still. His eyes were on the ground near her wagon, not on her. He pointed, not at her, but at the edge of the track, just past the mule. Ellie frowned. She looked, it was just dust. He pointed again, more insistently, and made a small, crumbling motion with his fingers. She looked closer. The dust where he pointed was different. It was darker, softer, and as she watched, a small pebble dislodged itself and rolled, vanishing over the edge. It was subsidence. The track was giving way. She understood. The rifle shot had not been aimed at her. It had been aimed at the unstable ground she was about to lead her mule onto. Nate took 2 steps forward, his moccasins silent. He carried himself with a warrior's discipline. Around his neck, on a simple thong, hung a single, perfect eagle feather, bound with sinew. It was an amulet of great power, an oath to his ancestors to protect the river. He stopped again, a safe distance away. He spoke, his English careful, learned from soldiers and agents. "The road is false." "I see that now," Ellie said, her throat dry. "Thank you." She looked at the stuck wheel. "But I am still stuck." He looked at her, then at the wagon, then at the sky. His gaze was comprehensive. He saw the medical supplies, the books. He saw a woman who did not belong, bringing things that did not belong, to a place that was about to break. "You must go back," he said. It was not a suggestion. "I cannot," Ellie stated, her resolve returning. "I am Dr. Hart. There is word of fever in Silver Ford. I am needed." The name Silver Ford changed the air between them. Nate's expression, already severe, hardened. The lines around his mouth tightened. Silver Ford, the place where the small stream, a tributary of his own sacred river, was being diverted. He knew there was no fever in Silver Ford. There was only Foreman Vickers and the railroad security. They were clearing the settlement, pushing out the last of the squatters and the Apache families who had camped there for generations, all to secure the water for the silver mine and the railroad. The sickness was Vickers' bullets. "There is no one to heal in Silver Ford," Nate said, his voice low. "The railroad has taken the spring. The people are gone." Ellie looked at him, seeing the conviction in his eyes. She had heard the rumors, of course, that the railroad security, led by Vickers, was heavy-handed, but she was a doctor. Politics was not her concern. Human life was. "If people are being forced from their homes, they will need me even more," she argued. "They will be injured. They will have nothing." "They will have Red Jack," Nate said, the name dropping like a stone in the heat. "He is Vickers' shadow. They wait in the rocks for stragglers." He gestured, not just to the unstable ground, but to the high ridges, the ambush spots he had seen. "You are driving into a trap." A conflict, older than both of them, settled between them, her absolute Eastern-bred faith in her mission. his absolute, land-bred knowledge of the truth. Ellie looked at the setting sun. It was turning the dust-filled sky into a blaze of crimson. If she turned back, she would not make it to safety before dark. If she stayed here, she was trapped between a cliff and an unstable road. And this man, this Apache warrior, was the only other human being for miles. He saw the dilemma on her face. He saw her stubbornness, her fear, and the strange, hard courage beneath it. He had a choice. He could leave her. She was the white world, the world that was killing his. Or he could honor the oath of the feather, which was to protect life, even when it was foolish. He sighed, a sound that was barely audible, and moved forward. "The mule," he said, "is stupid, but you are not. You will not go to Silver Ford tonight." He walked past her, giving the abyss a wide berth. He put his shoulder to the back of the wagon, his muscles coiling under the buckskin. He did not ask for her help. "Push," he commanded. Ellie, startled by the sudden shift, moved to the wheel. They pushed. The wagon groaned, resisted, and then, with a terrible scraping sound, the wheel popped free of the granite. The wagon lurched backward, settling heavily, safely, on the track. Ezekiel, sensing he was no longer required to be difficult, shook his head. Nate picked up his rifle. He looked at her, his dark eyes holding no warmth, only a heavy certainty. "I will take you to the high trail," he said. "It is safe. It is away from the railroad." "But Silver Ford," she began. "Is that way?" "Silver Ford is finished," he said. "Come. The coyotes will be singing soon, and you do not want to be here when the other hunters arrive." Ellie looked at the man. He was, by the standards of her world, a savage. He was also the man who had just saved her life. She looked at her wagon, her small, mobile piece of civilization, and she looked at the red, dying light in the west, the direction of the town she had to reach. She gathered her reins. She was a doctor. She would not be deterred, but she was also not a fool. "I will go with you," she said, "until the track is safer. But in the morning, I am going to Silver Ford." Nate said nothing. He simply turned and began to walk, his long, silent stride eating up the ground. He knew she would not go to Silver Ford. He would not allow it. He had to protect the river, and now, it seemed, he had to protect this stubborn, pale woman from the very world she was trying to save. Ellie climbed onto the wagon seat and urged Ezekiel forward, the mule, sensing a new authority, followed the Apache warrior into the growing shadows. They were two people, bound by nothing but the immediate, dangerous moment, moving as reluctant allies into the vast, unforgiving heart of the West. The high trail was a narrow, winding ledge, barely wide enough for the buckboard. Nate moved ahead on foot, his moccasins making no sound, his body blending with the pre-dawn shadows. Ellie Hart followed, her hands tight on the reins, her mule Ezekiel now moving with a reluctant, nervous energy. The man, Nada, had said he would lead her to safety, away from the railroad. But every step felt like a step deeper into a world she did not understand. As the sky turned from a deep indigo to a pale, sick gray, she saw it. Far below them, in the basin that held the settlement of Silver Ford, a column of smoke was rising. It was not the thin, white smoke of a cook fire. It was thick, black, and oily. It rose into the still morning air like a funeral shroud. "No," Ellie whispered, her promise to the people of Silver Ford, the rumor of fever. It all constricted her throat. "We must go down. That is a fire." Nate stopped. He did not turn to look at her, but his whole body was a rigid line of negation. "It is a fire," he agreed, his voice low. "It is the fire I warned you of. It is Vickers." "There are people there," she insisted, pulling Ezekiel to a halt. "If they are sick, and now there is a fire, I am a doctor. I must go." He turned then, His face, in the thin light, was like carved stone. "There is no fever, Dr. Hart. There is only the railroad, and that," he pointed to the smoke, "is what they call progress." She would not be deterred. She could not. Her entire life had been a fight against polite society, telling her she could not study, could not practice, could not be where she was. This man, this stranger, was just one more voice of denial. "If you will not guide me, I will find my own way down." He saw the iron in her. It was a foolish, brittle iron, but it was there. He knew he could not stop her without tying her up, and he was not a man who tied up women. He also knew that if she went down there alone, she would be dead or captive within an hour. He let out a long, slow breath, tasting the bitterness of the smoke on the wind. "There is a ridge," he said, changing direction. "We can see, but not be seen. Then you will understand." He led her for another 20 minutes, to a high promontory of rock that overlooked the entire settlement. She left Ezekiel tied in a cluster of boulders and crept to the edge beside Nate. What she saw was not a town meeting or a natural disaster. It was an expulsion. Silver Ford was a collection of canvas tents and crude wooden shacks. Or it had been. Now, half a dozen of the shacks were ablaze, the flames licking hungrily at the dry wood. Men in the tan uniforms of the railroad security, all armed with rifles, were moving through the camp. They were led by a large man with a thick neck and a foreman's hat, who was shouting orders. This must be Foreman Vickers. A large, official-looking notice was nailed to a post, property of the Arizona-New Mexico Railroad. All structures to be cleared for the construction of the Silver Ford Trestle Bridge, by order. It was all legal. The residents, a mix of out-of-work Mexican miners and a few Apache families who had refused to leave the river, were being rounded up. Their meager possessions were thrown to the ground. Ellie watched, horrified, as one security man kicked over a pot of beans simmering on a small fire. The woman who owned it cried out and was shoved to the ground. It was then that Ellie saw the boy. He could not have been more than 12 years old. He was Apache. He had run back to a burning tent, perhaps to retrieve a pet, or a memory. A large, beefy security guard grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and threw him to the ground. The boy, with a flash of youthful defiance, spat at the man's boot. The guard's reaction was immediate and brutal. He raised his rifle and, using the thick wooden stock, swung it like a club. It connected with the boy's side and his arm. The sound of the impact, a wet, sickening thud and a high, sharp snap, carried even to the ridge. The boy screamed, a sound that was cut off as he crumpled to the dust, clutching an arm that was now bent at a sickening, unnatural angle. His mother lunged forward, and the guard shoved her back, raising the rifle again. Ellie moved. She did not think. She did not plan. The healer in her, the core of her entire being, simply took over. She heard Nate hiss her name, a sharp, angry sound. She felt his hand grab for her arm, but she was already scrambling over the rocks, sliding down the loose scree of the incline, her boots filling with gravel, her medical bag thumping against her hip. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice raw. "Stop it! I am a doctor. That boy is injured." She burst into the camp, a disheveled, wild-eyed woman in a dusty skirt, appearing as if from the rocks themselves. The security men froze, momentarily stunned by this apparition. Vickers turned, his face red with heat and exertion, darkening with anger. Ellie did not even see him. She ran straight to the boy, falling to her knees in the dirt beside him. He was conscious, his dark eyes wide with terror and pain. His left forearm was clearly broken. "It is all right," she said, her voice dropping into the low, calming tone she used for frightened patients. "I am here to help you." The boy's mother was beside her, tears streaming down her face, murmuring in Apache. "Get away from that thing," a voice boomed. Ellie looked up. Foreman Vickers loomed over her. He was even bigger up close, a wall of muscle and sweat and casual cruelty. He held a repeating rifle in one hand and a coiled whip in the other. "I am Dr. Eleanor Hart," Ellie said, her voice shaking with rage, not fear. "This boy's arm is broken. He has been assaulted by your man." Vickers laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Assaulted? That thing tried to bite one of my men. This is a legal clearing, ma'am. We are enforcing railroad law." "This is not law. This is brutality," Ellie said, her hands moving with practiced speed. She was already digging through her bag, pulling out clean linen for bandages and 2 flat wooden splints. "Now, stand aside." "I will not," Vickers said, his smile vanishing. He did not like being challenged, especially by a woman. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her flesh like a steel trap. "You are interfering with official railroad business. That is a crime in this territory." "Let go of me," Ellie hissed, trying to wrench her arm free. "No, I do not think I will," Vickers said, his voice dropping. He signaled to 2 of his guards. "Boys, it seems we have an agitator. She is obstructing our work. Arrest this woman." The guards moved in. Ellie looked around, desperate. The other residents watched, their faces numb with fear. There was no help here. And then chaos erupted. From the ridge above, a sharp, high cry cut through the air. It was a sound that was not human and not animal, a sound that drilled straight into the primitive core of the brain. It was followed by a low, terrible rumble. A cascade of rocks. Large boulders and small stones came crashing down the cliff face on the far side of the camp, away from the civilians but directly toward the railroad's supply wagons. "Ambush!" one of the guards screamed. "Red Jack!" "It is the Apache!" another yelled. Vickers released Ellie's arm, his head snapping toward the sound. He and his men raised their rifles, firing wildly at the cliffs. "Take cover, form a line." In that single, perfect moment of distraction, Nate was there. He had dropped from the ledge, silent as a hawk's shadow. He did not go to Ellie. He went to the boy's mother. He grabbed her shoulder, spoke one sharp word in Apache, and shoved her toward a narrow cleft in the rocks that Ellie had not even seen. Then he was at Ellie's side. His hand closed on her upper arm, the same one Vickers had grabbed. But his grip was different. It was not a grip of malice. It was a grip of absolute, impersonal command. "Move!" he hissed. He did not wait for her to obey. He half lifted, half dragged her, pulling her and the injured boy whom Ellie managed to scoop up, her training taking over even in her panic toward the same cleft in the rocks. Bullets kicked up dust where they had been standing. A shot rang out, and Nate grunted, but he did not slow. They tumbled into the narrow canyon, a dark, cool space hidden from the sun. Nate led them, running, stumbling, climbing over boulders, for what felt like an eternity, until the sounds of shouting and gunfire were faint and distant. They finally stopped in a hidden alcove, a wide, sandy-bottomed shelter under a massive overhang of rock, a small spring, green with moss, seeped from the wall, collecting in a shallow pool. The boy's mother was already there, rocking back and forth, and they were not alone. 2 other Apache men, young, muscular, and armed with bows and knives, were in the shelter. They were refugees from the camp. Their eyes were blazing with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. Ellie, her lungs burning, gently laid the boy down. He was whimpering, in shock from the pain and the escape. She immediately went to work, her hands, though shaking, becoming steady. One of the young Apache warriors, his name was Taza, stepped in front of Nate. He knocked an arrow. He spoke in rapid, guttural Apache. Ellie did not need to understand the words. The tone was universal. It was the demand for blood. Ellie watched, her heart in her throat. She expected Nate, the man who had fired a warning shot, the man who moved like a predator, to agree. She expected him to take the bow, to lead these men in a doomed, suicidal charge back to the camp. Nate stood. He was breathing hard. Blood was seeping through his buckskin shirt from a shallow graze on his shoulder, where a bullet had torn the flesh. He looked at Taza. He held up his hand, palm out. He spoke. His voice was low, firm, and compelling. He did not shout. He did not posture. He reasoned. Ellie watched, mesmerized. He was not giving orders. He was leading. He pointed to the young boy on the ground, his arm in Ellie's hands. He pointed to the boy's weeping mother. He spoke of the future, of living. He spoke of the stupidity of trading 3 lives for a single, empty moment of revenge. Taza argued, his voice cracking with rage. He spat on the ground, pointing back toward Silver Ford. Nate did not waver. He simply stood, his presence an anchor of calm discipline. He said something final, something quiet, and the honor of his words, the sheer reason of them, was more powerful than Taza's rage. Slowly, his shoulders slumping, Taza unknocked his arrow. He sat down heavily against the rock wall, his fight broken. For now. Ellie stared at Nate. In that moment, her perception of him shifted completely. This was not a savage from a dime novel. This was a man with a code, a man who valued life, a man who understood that true strength was not in the killing, but in the choosing not to. He had chosen to save lives, not to take them. Later, after she had set the boy's arm, using her last 2 splints and yards of precious linen, a scout, another Apache, slipped into the cave. He brought news. Foreman Vickers was furious. He had lost his prisoner and been made to look like a fool. A new poster was being printed at the railroad depot. Nada. The Apache agitator was now wanted. A bounty of $100 was offered for him, dead or alive, for inciting a riot and kidnapping Dr. Eleanor Hart. The scout added more, his voice grave. Red Jack's men were also asking about Nate. They had not forgotten that it was Nate who had given an anonymous tip to the army, diverting a massive illegal shipment of gunpowder they had planned to sell to the highest bidder last year. The bounty was from both sides of the law. Ellie finished tying the bandage. Her hands were caked in the boy's blood and the red dust. Her mission, her simple, pure, unblemished ideal of healing all, was in ruins. She had been forced to choose. The moment she ran to that boy, she had chosen. She was now a criminal, a fugitive, and an accomplice to an outlaw. She looked at Nate, who was cleaning the graze on his shoulder with water from the spring. I did not mean for this to happen, she said, her voice small. I just wanted to help him. Nate looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. You cannot be a doctor in the middle of a war and not choose a side, he said, his voice flat. Vickers is not just building a bridge. He is stealing the water. He told her about the rumors, the whispers in the high country. He told her of a place called Sun Canyon, a sacred gorge where 3 rivers joined. That is the real prize, he said. Not the silver, not the bridge, the water. Whoever controls Sun Canyon controls this entire land. Vickers, Red Jack, the railroad, they all want it. Ellie looked at the boy, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep. She looked at his mother. She looked at the 2 angry, dispossessed young men. These were her patients now. This was her community. Her Eastern ideals, her belief in neutrality, her plans for a neat, whitewashed clinic. They all seemed like a child's dreams. This was the reality. She stood up and began to methodically clean her instruments, putting them back in her bag. I will not abandon these people, she said, her voice no longer small. It was quiet, but it was as hard as the granite around them. Vickers has taken Silver Ford. He cannot have the mountains, too. She looked at Nate, meeting his gaze directly. I am a doctor. I will not run. I will set up my station here, in these hills. I will not abandon these civilians. Nate studied her. A long, silent assessment. He saw the fear she was trying to hide, but he also saw the resolve, a core of steel he was beginning to recognize. He saw a woman who, when pushed, did not break. She sharpened. He gave a single slow nod. The choice had been made. The days in the hidden alcove settled into a harsh rhythm. Dr. Eleanor Hart established what she called her infirmary under the stone overhang. It was little more than her medical bag, a few blankets, and the small, clean spring. Her patients were the boy with the broken arm, his mother, the two young warriors, Taza and Din, and a handful of other displaced families who had trickled in, drawn by Nate's quiet summons. They were hungry, they were frightened, and they looked at her with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. Her wagon, and the bulk of her supplies, was still hidden on the high trail. Nate and Taza had managed to retrieve Ezekiel, the mule, but the buckboard itself was too large to bring into the narrow, hidden canyon. It remained a symbol of the life she had planned, sitting uselessly 2 miles away. Nate was a constant, silent presence. He came and went like the desert wind, his moccasins leaving no trace. He would disappear for hours, and Ellie would feel a strange knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. Then he would reappear, a brace of rabbits in one hand, or, more importantly, information. He brought the truth of their situation from a scout who had listened in at the railroad depot saloon. "Vickers is a puppet," Nate told her one evening, as she was changing the dressing on the boy's arm. The fire was low, casting deep shadows on the canyon walls. "A puppet for whom?" Ellie asked, concentrating on her work. "A syndicate, from the East, from your world." He used the term "your world" without venom, as a simple statement of fact. They do not care about the silver, they care about the water. Vickers is not just clearing the land for a bridge. He is selling the rights to the river itself. He has a stack of papers, signed by a judge in Tucson, that say the railroad controls all water for 50 miles on either side of the track. 50 miles? Ellie breathed, horrified. That is everything. That is this entire territory." "It is our home," Nate said simply. "And Red Jack," he continued, his voice hardening. "He is not a simple bandit. He is Vickers's cleaning crew. When the law's too slow, Vickers sends Red Jack to be faster. They are two hands on the same rifle." Ellie finished her task and sat back on her heels. The vast, impersonal greed of it was staggering. It was not a local dispute. It was a conquest, wrapped in the language of commerce. The conquest found them 2 days later. It was not Vickers. It was a man in a dusty suit wearing a tin star. He identified himself as the deputy from the town of Silver Ford, a town that no longer truly existed. He was a small man, with a nervous, shifting eyes, and he was flanked by 4 bored-looking railroad guards. They had found the wagon on the trail. "Dr. Eleanor Hart," the man said, reading from a piece of paper. "I am she," Ellie said, standing, wiping her hands on her apron. "By the authority of the territorial governor and the New Mexico Railroad Company, I am here to inform you that your license to practice medicine in this territory has been indefinitely suspended, pending an investigation into your association with known saboteurs and agitators." He held out the paper. It was official. It was legal. "This is absurd," Ellie said, her voice shaking. "I have done nothing but treat the injured." "You were witnessed interfering with a lawful property seizure," the man said, not meeting her eyes. "And you fled the scene with a known fugitive." He pointed at Nate, who stood at the mouth of the alcove, watching, his face a mask. "That man, Nada, he has a price on his head." "And," the deputy continued, gesturing to his men, "we are here to confiscate any and all medical supplies that might be used to aid and abet these criminals." He did not dare enter the alcove, not with Nate and Taza standing there, armed and silent. But he did not have to. His men were already at her wagon on the trail above. "You cannot," Ellie whispered, the blood draining from her face. "There are children here. People are hurt." "My orders are clear, ma'am," the deputy said. He tipped his hat, a meaningless, insulting gesture of politeness. You are to cease all operations. A good day to you. They left. Ellie scrambled up the narrow path to the high trail, Nate following her. She was too late. The buckboard was a skeleton. They had taken everything, her trunks of bandages, her bottles of quinine and laudanum, her surgical kit, her books. They had even taken Ezekiel, the mule. They had left her with only the small black bag she carried on her person. She stood by the empty wagon, the symbol of her failure. And for the first time since coming west, she wept. She cried hot, angry, frustrated tears, not for herself, but for the boy whose arm might now get infected, for the women who had nothing. Nate watched her. He did not touch her. He did not offer useless words of comfort. He let her have her grief. He had seen this kind of grief before, the grief of those who finally understand that the world they believed in, a world of rules, of fairness, of paper licenses, was a lie. When her sobs subsided into dry, ragged breaths, he spoke. "There is one who can help us," he said. "He is my teacher. He is Ha'a. He is the elder. He knows the river better than any man." Ellie, her face stained with dust and tears, looked at him, confused. "An elder, Nate. I do not need a shaman. I need my medicine." "He is not a shaman." Nate struggled for the word. "He is a listener. He knows what the land is thinking, and he is the only one the people will obey. You have lost your tools. Now you must find wisdom." He took her deeper into the mountains, on a long, arduous hike that forced her to focus on her hands and feet, not her despair. They climbed to a high mesa, where the wind blew clean and the sky felt close enough to touch. Ha'a was ancient. He was a man made of leather and shadow, his eyes clouded with cataracts, but seeing more than most. He sat outside a small wickiup, a simple brush shelter, grinding something in a stone bowl. Nate spoke to him in Apache for a long time. Ha'a did not look at Ellie, but she felt his awareness of her, a heavy, assessing presence. When Nate was finished, the old man set down his stone and turned his milky eyes toward Ellie. He spoke, his voice like dry leaves skittering on rock. Nate translated. "He says the river is sick," Nate murmured, his voice tinged with a reverence Ellie had not heard before. "The railroad men, with their black powder and their dynamite, have been blasting the rock near the springs. They have made the water bleed. The river, it does not forget." Ha'a spoke again, his voice rising in a low chant. "He says the blasts have angered the stone. They have made the earth unstable. The sky has been dry for 3 years. Nate continued, his gaze distant. "But the clouds are gathering." Ellie looked up. The sky was, as always, a cruel, endless blue. "There are no clouds." "They are gathering where we cannot see them." Nate said, "In the high peaks, Ha'a says that when the earth is wounded, the water comes to clean the wound. A flash flood. He says the river will take back what was stolen." A shiver, unrelated to the heat, ran down Ellie's spine. A flood? In this dry land? It was unthinkable. But she was a scientist. She understood the theory. A sudden, massive rain in the high mountains, falling on baked, impenetrable ground, would create a wall of water in the canyons. It would be a catastrophe. "When?" she asked. Ha'a shook his head. He spoke to Nate. "He does not know. Soon. He says we must respect the water, or it will teach us to." That afternoon, Ellie watched as Ha'a performed a simple ceremony. He took a small, intricately woven basket, walked to a place on the mesa where a tiny spring seeped from the rock, and he knelt. He did not pray in a way Ellie recognized. He spoke to the water, his voice low and conversational, as if to an old friend. He offered it a pinch of sacred pollen from his pouch. He collected a small amount in the basket, held it up, and then gently poured it back onto the rock. It was not religion, Ellie realized. Not as her father, the stern New England preacher, would have defined it. It was maintenance. It was a recognition of a cycle. It was a man tending to a relationship. The most important relationship in this desert, the one between the people and the source of their life. She, with her chemicals and her textbooks, had sought to control life. Ha'a simply sought to understand it. While she was on the mesa, Nate was challenged. Taza, his blood hot from the humiliation of the confiscated supplies, confronted him. She has brought them down on us. She is a bad omen. We should have fought. You, nada. You have the tongue of a white man now. You talk, and we lose. You must choose. Are you a warrior, or are you their messenger? Nate looked at the angry young man. He saw his own past in Taza's eyes. The rage, the desire for a simple, clean solution to a complicated, dirty problem. I am a warrior for my people, Nate said, his voice quiet. And my people are alive. That is my path. If you want to die for a moment of pride, Taza, I will not stop you. But you will die alone. He turned and walked away, leaving Taza to grapple with the bitter truth of his words. The conflict, however, remained. A sharp stone in Nate's own gut. Was he a bridge, or was he a man being torn apart by the two shores? The turning point came 3 days later. A life for a life. A scout found him, one of Vickers' men, a railroad guard who had been at Silver Ford. He was alone, delirious, his legs swollen to twice its normal size from the bite of a rattlesnake. He must have been separated from his patrol. Taza found him first. He dragged the man into the center of the alcove and drew his knife. This one, Taza spat, was the one who kicked the fire. I saw him. The guard, pale and sweating with fever, looked at the knife, then at the ring of hostile Apache faces, and he whimpered. Let him die, Taza said. It is the desert's justice. No. Ellie's voice cut through the tension. She pushed her way forward. She looked at the terrified man, his face familiar from the raid. She felt a wave of revulsion. He was her enemy, and he was her patient. Put the knife away, Taza, she said, her voice low and commanding. He is not our people, Taza argued. He is a man, Ellie said, kneeling, and he is dying. That is all that matters. She opened her small bag. She had her scalpel. She had carbolic acid. She had one clean needle and catgut. Hold him, she ordered. Nate watched. He watched her as she cut into the man's flesh, her hand precise and steady, slicing open the twin punctures to drain the venom. He watched her as the man screamed and cursed her, calling her a traitor and an unspeakable name. He watched her clean the wound, her face a mask of pure, dispassionate concentration. When she was done, she sat back, her hands covered in his blood. The man had fainted from the pain. He will live, she said. She looked at Taza. A life is a life. That is my code. It is not yours. It is mine. And in this place, it is the law. Nate felt something shift inside him, a profound realignment. He had seen courage in battle. He had seen the courage of defiance. But this was a different courage. It was the courage to heal your enemy, to hold to your oath when it was the hardest. He had saved her from the cliff, but she, in this moment, had saved them all from the poison of Taza's rage. His respect for her, which had been a grudging acknowledgement, became a deep, resounding chord. The man was delirious for a day. He woke, his fever high, and he began to talk. He did not know where he was. He was back in the saloon, bragging to his friends. Vickers, he's a smart one, the man muttered, his eyes rolling. Gonna be rich, that Eastern syndicate, paying a fortune. Ellie and Nate exchanged a look. They sat by the man, listening. Gonna blow it all to hell, the man chuckled, then grimaced in pain. Sun Canyon. Yeah, that's the spot. Turn the whole damn river. Send it right to the mine. The dynamite. It's all set. Ellie leaned closer. "When?" she whispered. "When will he do it?" "Gotta be ready. 3 nights." The man slurred. "The boss said 3 nights. Then we all get a bonus. All the water we want." He lapsed back into unconsciousness. The air in the alcove was tomb still. 3 nights. Nate and Ellie walked to the mouth of the canyon, looking out at the vast, silent landscape. The warning from Ha'a about a flood. The timeline from their enemy. It was all one and the same. Vickers was not just diverting the river. He was going to use a massive explosion to change its course permanently, right at the sacred gorge of Sun Canyon. And he was going to do it just as the heavens were preparing to open. "He will flood the entire basin," Ellie said, her voice hollow. "All the low-lying camps, the families, they will be washed away. He will call it an act of God." "And he will be the only one with water left," Nate finished. "He will own the desert." Their gazes met. The time for reacting was over. "We have to stop him," Ellie said. "We cannot stop the explosion," Nate said, his mind already working. "We are too few, but we can stop the people from being there. We must evacuate the lowlands. Everyone—" "And the proof," Ellie countered, her mind racing. "If we just move the people, he will wait. He will do it next week. We must expose him. We need those papers. We need the proof of the sale, the proof of the dynamite." A plan began to form, desperate and thin, but a plan nonetheless. "First, we save the lives," Nate said. "Then, we take the justice." He walked to the center of the camp. He picked up the ceremonial drum that Ha'a had left, the one used to call the water. He looked at Taza, at the families, at Ellie. He began to beat it, a low, steady, insistent rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. It was not a call to war. It was a call to gather, a call to move, a call to life. The sound echoed from the rock walls, rolling out into the canyons, a silent, thrumming message that the time of waiting was over. The drum was a heartbeat in the stone. Thump, thump, thump. It was a sound that did not echo so much as soak into the land, traveling through the dry washes and up the canyons. It was a call that Nate had not made in a long time, and it was answered not by a war party, but by a collection of the broken and the desperate. They gathered 2 nights later, in the only place that was not wholly owned by the railroad, the back room of the Cantina de las Hermanas, run by Maria and Rosa Delgado. The cantina itself was a long, low adobe building that sagged in the heat, but inside it was the territory's true center of information. Maria Delgado was a woman of sharp angles and sharper instincts. She poured cheap whiskey for railroad men and miners, listened to their boasts and their grievances, and remembered everything. Her younger sister, Rosa, was the dreamer, gentle and quick-witted, who tended the small, dusty garden out back. They were the daughters of a Mexican prospector and an Apache woman, and they belonged to both worlds and neither. They trusted no one but each other. Nate and Ellie arrived under the cover of a moonless sky. The air was thick, heavy with the promise of a rain that would not fall. It was the first time Ellie had been in a town, even this ghost of one, since the day in Silver Ford. She felt the eyes of the few drunken prospectors in the main room slide over her, a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Maria met them at the door to the back room, her dark eyes assessing Ellie. "She is the one," she asked Nate in Spanish. "She is the one," he confirmed. The room was small, lit by a single kerosene lamp. 2 men were already there. One was a young Apache rider, Taza, his face still a mask of simmering rage, representing the half-dozen other young men hiding in the hills. The other was a surprise. It was Deputy Cole. He was the nervous man with the tin star who had served her the notice and confiscated her supplies. Now, he sat hunched over a cup of black coffee, his hat in his hands. He looked ill. "Dr. Hart," he said, his voice a low gravel. He did not get up. I did not know. When I signed on, I thought I was keeping the peace, not this. You are here now, deputy, Ellie said, her voice cool. She had no medicine left for forgiveness. He is with us, Nate said, a statement of fact. He is the law Vickers forgot. Maria shut the door. The noise from the bar instantly muffled. And us, she said, gesturing to herself. And the miners. Juan is coming. As if summoned. A fifth person joined them, slipping in from the alley. He was Juan, the unofficial leader of the Mexican miners who had been starved out by the railroad. He was a small, wiry, tough man with dynamite scars on his hands. Vickers owes us for 3 months, Juan said, his voice soft but dangerous. And now he steals the water we need to even pan for scraps. My men are ready. They were a poor excuse for an army, a renegade warrior, a disgraced doctor, a disillusioned lawman, a saloon keeper, an angry miner, and a boy. This is the plan, Nate said, unrolling a piece of tanned deer hide he had stolen from a railroad surveyor's camp. He sketched in the dirt floor with a piece of charcoal. Sun Canyon, 3 nights. Vickers will use dynamite to turn the river. We have 3 tasks. He looked at Taza and Juan. 1. We must move the people. Every family, every prospector, every Apache camp in the lowlands. 2 miles clear of the wash. This is your task. Taza, you will take the high camps. Juan, you will warn your people in the arroyo. I will take the riverbed. He looked at Maria and Cole. 2. We must have proof. When the flood comes, Vickers will call it an act of God. We must prove it was an act of greed. Cole, you know his office. Maria, you know the telegraph. Vickers keeps a ledger, Cole said, his voice gaining a bit of strength. He writes everything down. Stupid, for a smart man. And he gets telegraphs from the syndicate. They are in code. But I know where he keeps the key. I can read the code, Maria said simply. And I can send a message of my own, if I get the chance. And 3, Nate finished, his voice dropping. The dynamite. We cannot stop the flood Ha'a has foretold, but we can stop Vickers from directing it. We must cut the fuse. That is suicide, Juan said. The canyon will be guarded by Vickers's men in red jacks. It is my task, Nate said. There was no discussion in his voice. The air in the room was suffocating. The sheer impossibility of it settled on them all. Ellie, who had been silent, spoke. You will need a signal, she said. When the people are clear, when the proof is secured. You cannot light a fire. They will see it, but I had a signal lamp. It is gone, Cole said, looking at his boots. They took it all. But I know how it works, Ellie persisted. A bright lamp, a tin can with a hole, a flash, 3 short, 3 long. You can make 1. Maria. Nate looked at her, a new respect in his eyes. She was adapting. Good, he said. 3 short, 3 long. As they talked, Ellie's eyes were drawn to a deep, unhealed gash on Juan's hand, festering from work and dirt. Your hand, she said, it is infected. It is nothing, Juan said, dismissive. It will be your arm, and then your life, if it is not cleaned, she said, her tone sharp. She looked at Maria. Do you have hot water, a clean needle, and your strongest whiskey? For the next hour, she worked. With her small bag, she had a few tools left. She lanced the wound, cleaned it with alcohol, and stitched it closed with a neatness that made the men wince. As she worked, she taught. You do not pull the thread tight, she explained to Nate, who watched with an intense, focused curiosity. You leave room for the swelling, and you must hold the wound closed before you stitch, like this. She showed him how to apply pressure, how to stop the bleeding on a practice cloth. If I am not there, you must be able to do this. A life is a life. Nate, even yours. He, in turn, taught her. The next day, as they scouted the evacuation routes, he stopped, pointing to the ground. "What do you see?" "Dust," she said. "Look again." He knelt, tracing a faint, almost invisible mark. "A shod horse. Heavy rider. He is favoring his left. He passed this way an hour ago, moving fast." He showed her how the dust was scattered, how the small pebbles were turned. "You walk," he said, "and you make noise. Your world." He took a step, and it was as if the ground absorbed him. "You must be the shadow. Place your foot, heel, then toe. Let the earth hold you." She tried. She was clumsy, her skirts a liability. But she learned. She learned to listen, not just with her ears, to smell the air for the scent of a cold fire, to feel the ground for vibrations. As they worked, the land itself grew more tense. The sky, which had been a clear, high blue, was now hazed with a sickly yellow. Clouds, high and thin, were gathering in the peaks, like an army amassing on a ridge. The air was sticky. There was a smell, not of rain, but of dust and ozone. A charged, electric scent. Even the river, low as it was, seemed to move differently, the current sluggish and dark. Ellie, emboldened by her new role, took her own part of the plan. She went to the women. There were a few left in the settlement, the wives of railroad men, the woman who ran the dry goods store. They met by the community well, the last source of public water. "He is taking the water," Ellie told them, her voice not loud, but carrying. She was not a politician. She was a doctor, and she spoke of health. "What happens when your children are sick, and the only water is owned by a man who charges $1 a cup? What happens when the river is gone?" "That is Apache talk," one of the women said, her eyes suspicious. "It is mother talk," Ellie countered, her gaze steady. "Who owns the water? Who owns the rain foreman Vickers is building a wall around your future?" She planted the seed. It was all she could do. That evening, Maria told a story. They were in the cantina, the tension so thick it was like a fog. "My grandmother," she said, her voice just for Ellie and Cole, "used to say that the river has a soul, un alma. She said it sees everything. It remembers the miners who poison it, and it remembers the women who sing to it when they wash their clothes. It is a living thing." "That is a lovely legend," Ellie said. "It is not a legend, Doctor," Maria said, her face serious. "It is a fact. The water remembers greed, and when the greed gets too heavy, the river shrugs. It washes itself clean." The words hung in the air, just as the door to the cantina slammed open. Foreman Vickers stood there, flanked by 2 of his men. Red Jack himself was behind him, a tall, silent figure in a long duster, his face scarred and his eyes dead. The bar went silent. "Where is he?" Vickers roared, his eyes scanning the room. "Where is the Apache murderer?" Maria stood, her hands flat on the bar. "We have seen no one, Foreman. It is a quiet night." "Quiet," Vickers laughed, a nasty sound. He walked forward, his boots heavy. His eyes fell on Rosa, who was shrinking back near the kitchen door. He smiled. You are the sister." Maria moved, but Red Jack was faster. He stepped in front of her, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Vickers grabbed Rosa by the arm. The young woman cried out, a small, terrified sound. "Let her go," Maria said, her voice a deadly whisper. "Oh, I will," Vickers said, pulling Rosa close. "I will let her go. As soon as you find your amigo, you tell Nadaya. You tell him that if he is not at the Sun Canyon Depot by sunrise, your sister, she will pay for his crimes. You tell him I want to negotiate, and you will be the messenger." He shoved Rosa toward his men. "Take her!" Maria watched, her face a mask of white-hot rage and black terror. Her sister was being dragged out the door. "Maria, no," Cole said, his hand on his gun. "Do not," Red Jack murmured. his eyes on Cole. "It would be a pity." Vickers left. The cantina was silent, save for a single choked sob from one of the townswomen. Maria stood for a long, terrible moment. Then she turned. She looked at Ellie. Her face. It was not the face of a broken woman. It was the face of a woman who had just made a terrible calculation. "He thinks he has a hostage," Maria said, her voice shaking but hard as iron. "He thinks I am his messenger." She looked at Cole. "You must get to Vickers's office, now. While he is distracted." Cole nodded, his face grim. He slipped out the back. "He has made a mistake," Maria whispered as she began to bolt the front door. "He has not taken a hostage. He has just given us an agent. I know where they will keep her. I know the depot." Cole returned an hour later, his face pale, his hands shaking. He was carrying a single, rolled-up piece of paper. "I got it," he breathed, spreading it on the table. It was the blast plan. "It is all here, the charges, the lines. He means to blow the entire east wall of the canyon." Ellie looked at the map, tracing the lines. "Heel, then toe," she whispered to herself, her mind following Nate's logic. She traced the main fuse line, a thick red mark. Then she saw it. "Deputy," she said, her voice sharp. "What is this?" She pointed to a second line, drawn in a faint blue ink, originating from a different location, a supply shed behind the main charge, and connecting to the same central point. Cole squints. I do not know. That is not Vickers' hand. That looks like Red Jack's mark." "A secondary fuse," Ellie said, her blood turning to ice. "A backup?" "Or," Nate's voice came from the shadows by the door, and the three of them jumped. He had entered without a sound. "It is not a backup. It is a betrayal." He looked at the map. "Vickers wants to redirect the river, but this blue line, this is not a redirection. This is a demolition. Someone wants to bring the entire canyon down, to bury the river, not just move it." The smell of ozone was stronger now, a sharp tang in the air, far in the distance. For the first time in 3 years, a low, hesitant rumble of thunder sounded. The sky tore open. The low, hesitant thunder had become a steady, deafening drum, and the rain did not fall. It hammered. It came down in solid, gray sheets, turning the red dust to a thick, running slurry that was half mud, half blood. It was in this chaos that the plan, already desperate, began to unravel. Deputy Cole, his slicker soaked through, walked with his head down toward the railroad depot. The building was a hive of activity, lanterns moving behind the fogged-up windows. He had his badge pinned to his coat, his only armor. He was walking, as he saw it, to his own execution, but he had given his word. He pushed the door open. The room was hot, filled with the steam of wet wool and the smell of stale whiskey. Foreman Vickers was there, his face flushed with triumph. He was standing over a small table, a bottle in one hand. Rosa Delgado was tied to a chair in the corner, her face pale but her eyes blazing with defiance. And in the shadows, by the cold stove, stood Red Jack. "Well, well," Vickers boomed, seeing the badge. "Look what the storm washed in, the town's very own conscience. Come to arrest me." "Cole." "No, Foreman," Cole said, his voice a low, shaky gravel. He tried to keep his eyes off Rosa. I have seen the error of my ways. This is your territory. I just want to be on the winning side." Vickers laughed, a thick, ugly sound. "The winning side, I like that." Red Jack, however, was not laughing. He stepped out of the shadow. He was not a big man, not like Vickers, but he moved with a coiled, serpentine grace. He looked at Cole, his dead eyes taking in the nervous twitch, the damp coat. "I know you," Red Jack said, his voice a soft rasp. "I do not think so," Cole said, his hand straying toward his pistol. "Oh, yes," Red Jack said, stepping closer. "Fort Bowie, 3, maybe 4 years ago. You were not a deputy. You were a clerk, the little man who counted the bullets, the one who filed the report on ammunition expenditures." Cole's blood turned to ice. He remembered a hot, dusty afternoon. A report he had been ordered to file, a discrepancy. 50 rounds of ammunition used, and the official report said it was for target practice. But he had heard the rumors. The prisoners, a group of Apache elders, shot in a dry wash while attempting escape. You were Sergeant Jack," Cole whispered, the realization dawning. "And you were the little rat who got me discharged," Red Jack said, his face splitting into a terrible scar tissue smile. "Not jailed. Mind you, they do not jail you for cleaning up, but discharged for conduct unbecoming, all because you counted the bullets." Before Cole could move, Red Jack struck. He did not go for his gun. He was a brawler, a man who liked the feel of bone breaking. He drove a heavy, brass-knuckled fist into Cole's stomach, folding the deputy in half. "No!" Rosa screamed. Vickers watched, amused. "Let him have his fun." Red Jack hit Cole again, a brutal blow to the side of the head that sent the deputy crashing against the telegraph desk. "You should have stayed a clerk," Red Jack spat, kicking him in the ribs. He drew a long, thin knife. "Now you are just another piece of paper to file." As Red Jack raised the knife, Maria Delgado, who had slipped in the back door behind him, made an impossible choice. She saw her sister. She saw the monster about to kill Cole, and she saw the telegraph key on the desk. She did not scream. She did not run to her sister. She lunged for the key. She was a fast operator, trained by the railroad itself. While Red Jack's attention was on the bleeding man at his feet, her fingers began to fly, tapping out a frantic, desperate message. She faked the sender code. She pretended to be Vickers, reporting to the syndicate in Tucson. "Vickers to HQ. All hostiles cleared. Hart and Apache neutralized. Ready to proceed. Moving up timetable. Will detonate at midnight. Midnight. Confirm." She did not know if it would work. She only knew Vickers checked his incoming messages every hour. If the syndicate confirmed, Vickers would be forced to act now. Not in 3 nights. It was their only chance. Red Jack heard the clicking. He turned, roaring, distracted. In that second, Ellie Hart, who had been waiting by the alley door, moved. She had seen Cole go down. She saw Maria at the key. Ellie ran, not to the telegraph, but to the man. She grabbed Cole by the collar, her small frame straining. "Deputy, on your feet." Cole was barely conscious, blood pouring from a gash in his side where the knife had grazed him. Ellie hauled him, using the chaos, the rain, the shouting, as cover. She dragged him out the door and into the alley, into the driving, horizontal rain. Red Jack turned back, his knife bloody, but his prey was gone. He looked at Maria, who stood, pale and defiant, her hand off the key. He grabbed her, his fingers biting into her arm. "Where is Rosa?" Maria demanded, her eyes finding her sister. You are clever," Red Jack hissed, dragging her. "Both of you." He threw Maria toward Vickers. "The bitch at the key. She sent a message." Vickers' face purpled. What message?" But before he could act, the telegraph on his desk, the incoming receiver, began to chatter. "HQ to Vickers. Confirmed. Midnight. No delays. Syndicate is pleased." Vickers stared at the paper. He looked at the clock. It was 10:30. He looked at Red Jack. "You heard it. Midnight. Forget the deputy. Get your men to the canyon. Now. No one interferes. No one." In the alley, Ellie had Cole pressed against the adobe wall. The rain was washing the blood away as fast as it came. "It is deep," she said, her voice clinical, her hands moving with a desperate speed in the dark. She tore a strip from her own skirt. packing the wound. "You must hold this. Hold it, or you will bleed out before we get you to the hills." He knew me," Cole choked, his body shaking with cold and shock. "He is ex-military," Ellie said, pulling his arm over her shoulder. "Discharged. For killing civilians. For killing Apache. That is what he is." "He is a monster," Cole breathed. "And we are going to stop him," Ellie said, her voice a raw promise. She hauled him up. "Heel, then toe. Deputy. We are walking like shadows." It took them an hour to get to the high cave. It was a miserable, slow, agonizing journey. By the time they arrived, Ellie was soaked to the bone, her clothes and hands caked in mud and Cole's blood. The cave was a small pocket of frantic, cold activity. It was the staging ground for the evacuation. Below, in the wash, a thin, silent line of people was moving. Juan and Taza had done their work. Apache families, Mexican miners, a few white prospectors, all of them, united by the threat, were moving to high ground. Nate was there, standing at the mouth of the cave, a dark silhouette against the gray, rushing storm. He was directing the last of the families into a larger, safer cavern further up. When he saw Ellie carrying the half-dead deputy, he moved to help. He took Cole's weight with an easy, animal strength and laid him by the small, sputtering fire. Ellie immediately went to work, her hands shaking from cold, not fear. "He needs to be stitched. Maria." She sent a signal. "They are at the depot. Rosa." "Maria is a warrior," Nate said, his voice quiet. He was watching Ellie, not Cole. He saw the mud, the blood, the exhaustion. "And you," she said, looking up at him, "are hurt." He had been favoring his left arm. The old wound, a bullet he had taken years ago, combined with the new graze, was seizing up in the cold, wet air. The dampness was like poison in his joints. He had been lifting women and children up the rocks for hours, and his shoulder was a burning knot of agony. He had hidden it, until she saw. "It is nothing," he said, turning away. "It is not nothing," she snapped, her professional anger cutting through her fear. "You are favoring it. If you have to fight, if you have to climb." She stood up and walked to him, her face set. "I am so afraid." "Nate," she whispered, her voice breaking for a second. "I am afraid I have led you to this, that my presence, that I have doomed you." He looked at her. He saw the terror, the guilt. He looked down at the moving line of people in the wash, disappearing into the storm. "You did not doom me, Dr. Hart. You focused me." He looked at the refugees. "They are moving. They are alive. Because of your warning. Because of Cole's map. Because of Maria's courage. And because I am here." He touched the eagle feather at his neck. "This is my path. I do not run from it." Ellie looked at the people, a moving stream of humanity. Her heart ached. She had wanted to save them with medicine. But this was a different kind of healing. She nodded, her resolve hardening, her fear finding its proper place, behind her duty. "Then you will need your arm," she said. She tore another, drier strip from her petticoat. "Bind it as tight as you can. It will keep the warmth in. It is all I can do." He let her. For a moment, they stood close, her small hands wrapping the cloth tightly around his bicep and shoulder. A silent, practical intimacy. The moment was shattered by Juan, the miner, who scrambled into the cave, his face pale with panic. "A message from the depot," he yelled over the storm. "Maria got out. She said, the telegraph. Vickers, he is blowing the charge at midnight." Ellie's blood ran cold. "Midnight, that is in less than an hour." "It is not all," Taza said, appearing from the rocks like a ghost. He was soaked, his eyes burning. "I followed the tracks. Red Jack, he and his men, they are not at the depot. They are not at the mine." "Where are they?" Nate demanded. "They are on the high path," Taza said, his voice grim. the only path to the dynamite. They are not guarding the charge. They are guarding the route. They are hunting for us. They were trapped. The evacuation was not yet complete. The dynamite was being lit, and the only way to it was blocked by a man who was waiting for them. And as that terrible final realization settled over them, the mountain groaned. It was not thunder. It was a deep, guttural whoomph, a sound that came from the rock beneath their feet. The ground shook. Dust and pebbles rained from the cave roof. Ellie and Nate ran to the mouth of the cave. Far below, in the belly of Sun Canyon, the river, swollen and angry from the rain, had visibly changed. A smaller, secondary explosion had gone off. A new channel had been ripped open, and a wall of brown, churning water was pouring where only dry rock had been seconds before. It was the test charge, the blue line on the map. It had worked, and the main fuse, the one that would bring down the whole world, was still burning. Somewhere in the dark, rainy night, counting down to midnight. The ground heaved. The sound, a deep, subterranean whoomph, was felt more than heard. A punch from the earth itself. It was not the main charge. It was the blue line on the map. It was Red Jack's charge. "He has lit it!" Ellie screamed over the roar of the rain, her voice torn away by the wind. "The test charge!" "He has done more than that." Nate's voice was a low growl at her ear. He pointed into the canyon. The river, already a swollen, churning beast from the downpour, had found the new channel. A wall of muddy water, ripped from its ancient bed, was now pouring into the lower basin, a place that had been dry for a generation. It was a terrifying, immediate success. "The people!" Ellie gasped, her eyes searching the line of refugees still moving on the slopes. He is still down there. He is guiding the last group." "Taza Juan!" Nate roared. "Get them to the high caves. Now do not stop, move!" The world dissolved into a nightmare of mud, rain, and shouting. The battle for Sun Canyon had begun, not with a single shot, but with the roar of a stolen river. From the ridge above, a new sound joined the chaos gunfire. Red Jack and his men, having set their charge, were now on the high path, firing down into the evacuation route, turning the desperate retreat into a slaughter. Bullets spanged off the rocks. A woman screamed. Ellie did not hesitate. Her mind, trained for the triage of a battlefield, took over. "In here," she yelled, finding a deep, wide alcove in the rock face. A shallow cave shielded from the gunfire above. "Get the children in here, now stay against the rock." She pushed a mother and her 2 children into the shelter. She saw the old man, his face serene in the chaos, helping a small boy who had fallen. Nate saw it too. He also saw, on the path above, a flash of movement. Red Jack, silhouetted against the gray, rushing sky, was reloading his rifle. He was taking aim, not at the families, but at He was eliminating the heart. "No," Nate said. He was gone, scrambling up the rock face, taking an almost impossible vertical path to intercept the killer. Ellie saw Nate climbing, a shadow moving against the stone, and her heart seized. She was torn, the people here, the man climbing to his death. She chose the people. The fight on the ledge was symbolic, but it was not clean. It was a brawl in the end of the world. Nate reached the high path just as Red Jack was leveling his rifle. Nate did not shout. He hit Red Jack's rifle with a leaping, full-body tackle, sending the bullet harmlessly into the sky. The 2 men crashed onto the slick, narrow ledge, their rifles skittering away, lost in the abyss. "The clerk," Red Jack spat, wiping mud and rain from his eyes. "He told me about you, the one who cost me my discharge." "And you," Nate grunted, driving a fist into the man's gut, "are the one who killed the elders." They fought. There were no bullets left. It was knives, fists, and the terrible, grinding strength of 2 men fueled by pure hatred. The rain was a solid wall, making every grip treacherous, every foothold a gamble. Red Jack was a killer, trained by the army, but Nate was a warrior, born of the rock itself. He fought with a cold, precise fury. His injured shoulder a dull, throbbing pain he simply ignored. Below, the chaos escalated. Foreman Vickers, watching from a safe promontory on the far side of the canyon, was enraged. His plan was falling apart. The evacuation was succeeding. He saw the firefight on the ledge. He saw the people hiding in the alcoves. If the river cannot clear them, he roared to the man beside him. The mountain will! He had his own plunger, connected to the secondary fuses, the ones meant to widen the new channel. He did not wait for Red Jack. He slammed his hand down on the detonator. This time, the explosion was not a whoomph. It was a crack. The entire cliff face above the refugees groaned, shuddered, and then gave way. It was not a slide of water. It was a slide of 10,000 tons of rock and mud. Ha'a had just lifted the small boy to safety when the wall of debris hit. He had time for one last look, one last act of protection. He threw his frail body over the child, taking the brunt of the slide. "Ha-ah-ah," Ellie screamed. The old man and the child had vanished under a tide of running mud and falling rock. The slide, a cascade of pure destruction, had another unintended consequence. High above, Vickers, laughing in triumph, reeled on his mule. The explosion, combined with a deafening, simultaneous crack of lightning that struck the ridge, terrified the animal. The mule reared, screaming, its hooves lashing out, the heavy leather pannier carrying Vickers' vital records, his coded telegraphs, his ledger from the syndicate. His forged land titles snapped. The heavy lockbox tumbled from the mule's back, hit the edge of the cliff, and burst open. A cloud of white paper, a grotesque parody of snow, scattered from the sky, tumbling down into the mud and the chaos. In the cave, Deputy Cole, bleeding, his side packed with Ellie's bandage, saw it. "The papers!" he rasped, his eyes wide. It is the ledger!" He was a lawman. He was wounded, but he was a lawman. He ignored the pain and crawled out of the cave, into the driving rain, grabbing at the wet, muddy pieces of paper. "Proof," he muttered, stuffing the syndicate's contracts inside his bloody shirt. "Gotta get the proof." On the ledge below, Ellie saw only the mud. The boy had been saved. He was scrambling free, but Ha'a was gone. Buried. No, not gone. A hand, a thin, frail hand, was sticking out of the mud, 20 feet down a sheer, slick bank. "He is alive," she cried. She looked around. There was a coil of rope on a dead prospector's mule. She did not ask. She took it. She tied it to a solid outcrop of rock, her hands clumsy with cold, fumbling with the knot. "Dr. Hart!" Taza yelled. "You cannot, it is not stable." "He is breathing," she yelled back. She wrapped the rope around her waist and stepped off the edge. She slid. She did not climb. The mud was like grease, the rocks beneath it like razors. A sharp stone, hidden in the slurry, caught her arm, slicing through her sleeve and her skin, a deep, burning gash from elbow to wrist. She cried out, a sharp, involuntary gasp, but she did not stop. She held the rope with her good hand, her boots finding no purchase. She landed hard beside the old man, the impact jarring her to the bone. His eyes were open. He was pinned, his chest crushed. He was dying. "Doctor," he whispered, his voice a dry leaf. "I am here," she said, tears mixing with the rain, her hands, one of them now pouring blood, digging him out. "I am here." On the high ledge, the fight had stopped. The mudslide had separated Nate and Red Jack, a new, gaping chasm between them. Red Jack was on the far side, laughing, trapped but alive. Nate was on the near side, his path to the main fuse now a sheer, 100-foot drop. He had failed. He looked down. He saw the river. He saw the papers scattering in the wind. He saw Cole, like a desperate crab. gathering them. And he saw Ellie. He saw her, 20 feet down a cliff, her arm a sheet of crimson, trying to lift a man who could not be lifted. He saw her impossible. Stubborn, beautiful courage. He scrambled down, his heart a cold stone in his chest. He reached the ledge just as she was trying to tie the rope around Ha'a. He put his hand on her good shoulder. "Nate," she sobbed. I cannot move him." "I know," he said. He was not looking at her. He was looking across the canyon, at the small, dark hole where the main fuse was still burning. He could smell it, the sulfur, the thyme. He reached up and, with a single, sharp pull, broke the leather thong around his neck. He pushed the eagle feather into her hand, curling her bloody fingers around the smooth, sacred quill. "No," she said, confused. "If I do not return," he said, his voice an order, a plea, a final testament. "Give this to my younger brother." "Nate, what are you doing? The path is gone." "There is always a path," he said. He looked at Ha'a. The old man met his gaze and gave a single, slow, peaceful nod. An understanding passed between them, a letting go. Nate turned, leaving her in the mud with his teacher. He ran to the edge of the new chasm, the one the mudslide had created. The storm, for a brief, terrible moment, paused. The thunder ceased. The rain softened to a whisper. And in that awful, sudden silence, the entire canyon could hear it. Shh! The sound of the main fuse, the big one, the one that would end the world, still burning. The clock had not stopped. It was still counting down. The hissing. In the sudden, terrible silence of the storm, the hissing was the only sound left. It was the sound of a snake, the sound of a clock, the sound of 10 million tons of rock preparing to fall. Dr. Eleanor Hart was on her knees in the mud, her good hand gripping the eagle feather Nadia had given her. Her other arm was a ruin of blood and shredded cloth. Below her, in the slurry, Ha'a'a's eyes were closed. His chest was still. The old man, the listener, was gone. She was alone on this side of the chasm, and Nate was on the other, 100 feet away, separated by the raw, gaping wound the mudslide had torn in the earth. The fuse was on his side, in a tunnel. He could not reach it. He had failed. Ellie looked at the rope she had used, still tied to the outcrop above her. She looked at her bleeding arm. She looked at the hissing. She had to move. The doctor in her, the part that calculated odds, knew Ha'a was lost, but the people in the caves were not. She jammed the sacred feather into her pocket, grabbed the rope with her good hand, and began to climb. Her arm felt as if it were on fire. The gash was deep, the muscle torn, and every pull sent a wave of white-hot nausea through her. She was a doctor. She knew she was in shock. She knew she was losing too much blood. She kept climbing. When she reached the top, she collapsed onto the ledge, a gasping, muddy heap. Nate was gone. She looked across the chasm, and the spot where he had been standing was empty. "Nate!" she screamed, her voice a raw tear in the night. "Here!" His voice was from below her. She crawled to the edge. He was not on the other side. He was in the chasm, traversing it, moving with a speed that was not human. He had found the path. It was a series of finger holds and toe holds, a network of roots and cracks in the sheer cliff face that no man should have been able to see, let alone climb, especially not in a driving rain. He moved like a spider, his injured shoulder a clear agony, but he did not stop. He was climbing toward her, but lower. "The mudslide!" he yelled, his voice echoing from the stone. "It opened the trench. The fuse! It is exposed!" She followed his gaze. She saw it now. The blast had not just created a chasm, it had sheared away the rock face, exposing the very trench the workers had dug for the dynamite. It was a narrow, muddy groove in the side of the cliff. and snaking through it was the thick, black, hissing fuse. Nate was climbing toward that trench. He reached it, 50 feet below her, and found a foothold. He was now standing on a ledge no wider than a man's boot, the hissing snake just inches from his face. "Ellie!" he yelled. "I need your eyes!" He could see the fuse, but he could not see the end. He could not see the charge. "The map," he roared. "Cole's map. The blue line. Where did it connect?" Ellie's mind, foggy with pain, tried to clear. The map, the blue line, the secondary charge. It connects to the same central point. "It connects," she screamed back. "It is the same charge. There is only one. You must cut it." Nate looked at the fuse. It was thick, wrapped in tarred canvas. His knife was gone. Lost in the fight with Red Jack, he had nothing. "I cannot cut it," he yelled. "My knife is gone." Ellie looked down. Her medical bag. It had been ripped from her waist in the slide. She was empty-handed. No. She looked at her belt. Her small scalpel case, the one she always carried, was still there, held by a single desperate thread. She ripped it free. "I am coming." "No, you are wounded." "You need a doctor," she screamed back. And she did not mean it as a healer. She meant it as a surgeon. She looped the rope she had used, checking the knot. She did not have the strength to climb down. She would have to trust the rope. She swung out, over the abyss, her body a dead weight, her one good hand gripping the rope. She slid, fast, the rope burning her palm, and landed, crashing, against the cliff face, just yards from him. "You are a fool," he breathed, his hand grabbing her, keeping her from falling. "I am," she gasped, the pain making her vision swim. "Now, we have to work." They were together, in the blast trench. It was a shallow, muddy grave, perched 1,000 feet above the canyon floor. The hissing was deafening, the smell of sulfur thick in their lungs. The fuse was spitting sparks. "How long?" he asked. "Midnight," she said. "We have maybe 10 minutes, maybe one." She opened her scalpel case, her last blade. It was small, delicate, but razor sharp. She looked at her arm. It was a mess. She was bleeding out. She knew it. "Ellie," he said, seeing it. He ripped a piece of his own shirt. "Your arm." "There is no time," she snapped. "Hold my hand." "What?" "My hand," she ordered. "It is shaking. The scalpel. I cannot hold it." He looked at her. Her face was chalk white, her eyes huge and dark. She was trembling, not from fear, but from shock and blood loss. He put his large, calloused hand over her small, shaking one, the one that held the tiny, gleaming blade. His strength, her knowledge, they were one. "Now," she whispered, her voice faint. "The wire. We have to find the copper wire inside." He pressed the scalpel, his hand guiding hers, and began to slice into the thick, tarred casing. It was tough. "It is too slow," he grunted. "Please," she whispered, her head slumping against his chest. She was fading. The climb, the wound. It was too much. "Please, go slow. If you go too fast, you will hit the spark. One spark." He stopped. He looked at her, at this impossible woman, bleeding to death on a cliff face, still giving orders, still saving the world. He felt her life, her warmth, fading against him. He took a slow, steady breath. He adjusted his grip, holding her, holding the scalpel, holding the fate of the entire canyon in his one hand. "I will slow," he murmured, his voice a vow, not just to her but to himself, to the future he had not dared to dream of until this moment. "I will slow at sunrise." It was a promise. If you live, if we live, I will not chase the wind anymore. I will choose this. I will choose you. He cut, heart, cut, breathe. He peeled back the tarred canvas. Inside, He saw it, the core, the copper wire, gleaming, waiting. "Now," he said. "Cut," she whispered, and she went limp in his arms. He drove the scalpel through, severing the copper. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any thunder. It was the sound of life, the sound of a future. Far below, in the depot, Red Jack, stranded by the mudslide, was not idle. He was a creature of chaos. He saw the firefight stop. He saw the figures on the cliff. He did not know what they had done, but he knew he had been cheated. He still had his own men, and he still had dynamite. "Light it," he roared. "Light it all." He lit a secondary charge himself, a bundle of dynamite sticks he had stashed. A charge not on any map. It exploded, a ragged, uneven boom that sent a new wave of shrapnel and rock across the canyon, catching his own men in a deadly crossfire. In the middle of that new chaos, Maria Delgado, who had been hiding in a water barrel, saw her chance. She ran, her knife flashing. She cut the ropes on her sister's chair. "Run, Rosa! Run for the hills now!" Rosa ran. Maria turned to follow, but a wounded railroad guard raised his rifle. Deputy Cole, leaning against the doorframe, his shirt a solid sheet of blood, saw it. He raised his own pistol. He was a clerk. He was a man who counted bullets. He fired one. The guard went down. Maria ran to Cole. "You are hit," she said. He got me again." Cole gasped, a fresh, dark stain blooming on his chest. "But I got the papers." He clutched the muddy ledger. "Go, get the doctor." On the cliff face, Nate was holding Ellie's unconscious body. The explosion from Red Jack had shaken them, but the ledge held. He had to get her up. He had to save her. He looked up. His path was blocked, and then he saw him. Red Jack. He had found a way up, a different path, and he was standing on the ledge above them, outlined against the first pale gray light of dawn. He had a pistol in his hand. "So," Red Jack rasped, "the savage and the whore, a fitting end." He raised the pistol, aiming not at Nate, but at the unconscious woman in his arms. Nate did not have his rifle. He did not have his knife. He had nothing. He did not need it. With his good hand, he reached behind him, to the small sheath on his back that no one ever saw. His hand closed on the smooth, worn handle. It was not a weapon of war. It was a tool, a skinning knife, balanced for throwing. "You," Nate said, his voice quiet, "do not deserve to see the sunrise." As Red Jack's finger tightened on the trigger, Nate threw. The knife flew, a spinning, silver arc in the pre-dawn light. It did not hit Red Jack's chest or his throat. It hit his hand. The pistol exploded, the bullet going wild, and Red Jack screamed. A high, thin sound as the gun, and two of his fingers, clattered into the abyss. He clutched his ruined hand, his face a mask of disbelief and agony. He teetered on the edge. Nate watched him. He could have climbed up. He could have finished it. He could have kicked the man into the darkness. But he did not. He looked at the man who had killed the elders, the man who had tried to kill Ellie, and he felt nothing. Only a great, cold stillness. "Your life," Nate said, "is for the law, not for me." He turned his back on his enemy. He looked down at Ellie's face. She was pale. She was bleeding. But as he watched, her eyelids flickered. Far to the east, a thin, impossible line of pale gold split the sky. The storm had broken. The birds, silent for so long, began to sing. Ellie's eyes opened. She saw his face. She saw the light. You cut it," she whispered. "We cut it," he said. "And," she started, her mind coming back. "The proof." "Maria is at the depot," he said, his voice rough. "She has her telegraph, and Cole, he has the papers." The rising sun, the first true sun in days, cut through the canyon, It was a clean, sharp, beautiful light. It hit the wet rocks, turning them to gold and copper. It hit the muddy, scattered papers that Ellie had seen in the mud, drying them, making them visible, legible. Nate looked at the sunrise. He looked at Ellie. His promise, made in the dark, came back to him, as solid as the rock beneath them. I will slow at sunrise. It was not a chase, it was not a battle, it was a beginning. The golden light of the new day was a physical shock. It cut through the gray, rain-washed air, illuminating the canyon in merciless detail. The battle of the night was laid bare, a landscape of mud, shattered rock, and exhaustion. On the high ledge, Nada held Dr. Eleanor Hart. She was conscious, her body trembling with shock, her good hand still clutching his eagle feather. His other hand was pressed against her bleeding arm, a desperate, clumsy tourniquet. "It is over," he said, his voice a low rasp. "No," she whispered, her eyes huge with pain, looking past him, down into the abyss. "Listen." At first, he heard nothing but the rush of the newly diverted river and the drip of water from the rocks. Then he heard it, a low, human sound, a groan. It came from the pile of mud and rock that had buried his teacher. "He is alive," Ellie breathed, the word a prayer. "Ha-ah-ah, he is alive." The realization was a jolt, more powerful than any fear. She tried to move, to get up, but her legs buckled. Nate was there, lifting her. He set her down gently. "Stay, I will go." "No," she snapped, her voice finding its steel. "He is pinned. He may be bleeding. You need me." She looked around, her mind frantic. "Taza Juan, we need help." Down below, the depot, which had been the eye of the storm, was now the center of a new, strange calm. The explosions had stopped. The gunfire was silent. The few remaining railroad guards, loyal only to a paycheck, looked at each other, at the ruined canyon, and at the rising sun. Their fight was done. Foreman Vickers, his face a mask of purple rage, stood on the depot platform, his pistol in his hand. His plan was in ruins. Red Jack was gone. The main charge was silent, and the river was wrong. "Get back to work," he roared at his men. "Find me Red Jack. I want that fuse lit." "No." The voice was not loud, but it cut through Vickers' tirade. It was the woman from the dry goods store, the one Ellie had spoken to at the well. She and a dozen other townswomen had come out of their homes. They were carrying frying pans, rolling pins, and a few old hunting rifles. They stood, a solid, unmoving line of calico and fury, between Vickers and the canyon. "You are obstructing railroad business," Vickers snarled, raising his pistol. "You are done, Foreman," the woman said, her voice shaking but firm. "You have poisoned our well long enough. We are done." From the high trail, a new sound came, the low, rhythmic chanting of men. Juan, having led his miners to safety, was leading them back down. They were armed with pickaxes and shovels. They saw the women. They saw Vickers. Juan stepped forward, his small frame rigid. "We are done. Tu, jefe," he called out, his voice carrying, "Huelga. Strike. We do not work. We do not move. Not until we get our pay for 3 months. And we get our water. The water belongs to the people." The miners and the women, they formed a ring, a circle of ordinary, angry faces. Around the depot, Vickers and his half-dozen remaining guards were trapped. You cannot," Vickers stammered, his bravado crumbling. He was interrupted by a new, alien sound, a sharp, high whistle, coming from down the tracks. It was not a freight engine. It was a single, powerful locomotive, pushing a single passenger car, and it was moving with priority. It hissed to a stop at the platform. The door opened. A man in a black, formal suit, his face stern and clean-shaven, stepped out. He was not a politician. He was not a railroad man. He looked at the armed women, the angry miners, and the furious foreman, and he did not blink. He announced, his voice like a gavel, am Territorial Judge Isaac Wright. I am here in response to an urgent telegraph from a Deputy Cole, reporting a conspiracy to commit mass murder and insurrection against the laws of this territory. Who is in charge? Foreman Vickers, who, an hour ago, had been a king, felt the last of his power evaporate. There is no insurrection, he said. This is a misunderstanding, a simple labor dispute. Is it? Judge Wright said. He turned, and Maria Delgado stepped out from the car behind him. She was pale, but her eyes were fire. She was carrying a stack of thin, yellow papers. These, Maria said, are the telegraphs you sent. Foreman, the ones to the syndicate. And these, she held up a second stack, are the ones they sent back, the coded ones, the ones ordering you to clear the basin by any means necessary. Lies, Vickers roared. Forgeries. Then you will not mind, the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. If we compare the signature, he held up one of the telegrams, and at that exact moment, Taza, having helped Nate free a badly injured but conscious from the mud, appeared. He was carrying the muddy, warped but intact ledger that Cole had gathered. He handed it to the judge. He found this, sir, Taza said. The judge opened the book. The ink was smeared, but the signatures were clear. He looked at the ledger. He looked at the telegrams. He looked at Vickers. It seems, Judge Wright said, that you have been a very busy man. Vickers saw the signatures. He saw the judge's face. He saw the ring of miners. He did not see an escape. He saw only the end. He did the last thing he could. He ran. He bolted from the platform, his heavy boots slipping in the fresh mud. He was a big man, but he ran with the speed of pure terror. He tried to scramble up the slick canyon wall, to get to the horses. He slipped. He went down, face first, into a deep pool of mud and river water. He came up, sputtering, choking, covered in the earth he had tried to steal. Juan and Taza were on him in a second, tying his hands. As Ellie, her arm now crudely bandaged by Nate, was half-carried, half-limped toward the depot to tend to Cole, a man stepped into her path. He was clean, in all this mud. He was perfectly, impossibly clean. He wore an Eastern suit, a gold watch chain, and a polite smile. Dr. Hart, he said, tipping his hat. A terrible tragedy. Truly. The syndicate I represent. We are appalled by Mr. M. Vickers' methods. Get out of my way, Ellie said. There are men who need me. Of course, the man said, his smile not wavering. He walked beside her. We are prepared to make amends. A new clinic, fully funded, in Santa Fe or perhaps Tucson, a state-of-the-art facility, all for you. We just want to put this ugliness behind us. Ellie stopped. She looked at him. She looked at the muddy, exhausted, brave people around her. She looked at the river. I am not leaving this river, she said. And you, sir, are not leaving this canyon. Judge, she called, her voice sharp. I believe this man is an accessory. The man's smile vanished. They brought Red Jack down next. His hand was a bloody rag, but his eyes were just as dead as before. The miners surged, the cry of, "Hang him, asesino," rising. Wait, Red Jack's voice was a rasp. He clutched his ruined hand. I demand a trial. I am a former sergeant of the United States Army. I have rights. I demand to be tried by a real court. Judge Wright silenced the crowd. He is correct. We are not a mob. We are a nation of laws. He looked at the depot. This is now a territorial courtroom. I will hear testimony. He looked at Nate. You, the man who disarmed him. Step forward. Nate stood before the judge. The crowd held its breath. Tell me what you saw, the judge said. Nate looked at Red Jack. He did not speak of the elders, of the rumors, of the years of hatred. He spoke only the truth of the last 12 hours. I saw him fire into a crowd of unarmed people, Nate said, his voice clear and steady. I saw him take aim at Dr. Hart. I saw him light a fuse to kill his own men. I did not kill him. I left him for the law. The judge nodded, his face grim. He will be transported to Santa Fe. He will be tried for his crimes. All of them. Ha'a'a, his leg splinted by Ellie, was propped against a wagon wheel. He was weak, but his eyes were clear. He had survived. He asked for water. Taza ran, not to a canteen, but to the small, sacred spring, the one that had been the start of it all. He brought the water back in a clay cup. Ha'a'a took the cup. He held it up, the sunlight catching the clear water. He looked at the Apache, at the Mexican miners, at the white townswomen. He said a single, soft word in Apache, a prayer of thanks. Juan, seeing the old man, took off his hat and crossed himself. Maria and Rosa, their arms around each other, bowed their heads. It was not a ritual of one people. It was a ceremony of a community, born in fire and water. Nate, Ellie said, her voice quiet. She was finished with Cole, who was stable. She had stitched her own arm, her movements clumsy, and Nate had rebandaged it, his large hands surprisingly gentle. He said nothing, but his presence, solid as the rock, was at her side. She was leaning on him, her strength finally gone. His own bound shoulder was pressed against her. They were a pair of broken, bandaged survivors, but they were standing. Above them, on the wreckage of the temporary bridge that Vickers had been building. Taza climbed up. He took a piece of white canvas, torn from a railroad supply wagon, and tied it to the highest point. It flapped in the clean morning wind, a flag of surrender, a flag of peace. The battle was over. The world after the battle was quiet and loud in its quiet. The first task was the dead, the railroad men, Red Jack's men, and 2 miners who had been caught in the crossfire. They were buried in a new plot, marked by simple wooden crosses, on a hill far from the river. The next task was the mud. It was everywhere, a thick, gray, suffocating blanket. It had to be cleared by hand, by shovel and bucket. The community, the one forged in the night, did it together, Apache, miner, and townswoman. They formed lines, passing buckets, their movements slow and rhythmic. And the last task was the unexploded dynamite. The canyon was a minefield. Judge Wright, a man of surprising practicality, conscripted the remaining railroad men. You brought this here, he declared. You will make it safe. Under the watchful eyes of Taza and Juan, the sullen men diffused the charges, pulling the sweating sticks of dynamite from the rock. The law, now that it had arrived, was swift. Foreman Vickers and the man from the syndicate were shackled and put on the train, bound for Santa Fe under heavy guard. Their trial, Judge Wright assured the crowd, would be a matter of federal record. Red Jack was treated by Dr. Eleanor Hart. She stitched his ruined hand, her face a mask of professional calm, though her stomach turned. You will tell them, he rasped, his eyes, still dead, watching her. Tell them what I did. I will tell them the truth, she replied, tying the bandage. That you are a murderer, and that you are my patient. My work is done. He, too, was taken in chains. He was not tried for his past. He was tried for his present, for the murder of the railroad guard, for the attempted murder of Deputy Cole, for firing on unarmed civilians. He did not hang. The syndicate, in a last desperate attempt to avoid more scrutiny, provided a lawyer. He was sentenced to life, in a prison in a far eastern territory, a place where the sun did not shine and the land was flat and wet. He was a creature of the desert, and they buried him in a swamp. The other railroad men, the ones who had simply followed orders, were given a choice by Judge Wright. They could face trial as accessories, or they could work. They would stay for 1 year, without pay, to help rebuild the town and dig the new, community-run irrigation channels. They chose to work. Deputy Cole did not die. He lay in a cot in the back of the Cantina de las Hermanas for a week, his breath a shallow rattle, with Ellie and Maria watching him in shifts. Ellie had no more medicine, save for willow bark for his fever and clean water. It was his own stubbornness that kept him alive. On the 8th day, he woke, and his eyes were clear. Judge Wright, who had delayed his departure, came to see him. He stood over the cot, a tall, imposing shadow. "You are a fool, Deputy Cole." "Yes, sir," Cole whispered. "You disobeyed orders, consorted with known fugitives, and got yourself shot. Twice." "Yes, sir." "You are also," the judge said, a small, rare smile touching his lips, "the finest lawman in this territory." He reached into his coat. He did not pull out a medal. He pulled out a new, shining badge. It was not tin. It was silver. It did not say deputy. It said marshal. "You will reform the force in this district." The judge said, "You will hire Taza, here, and Juan. You will make a force that looks like the people it protects." Cole looked at the badge, his eyes filling with tears. I cannot. I am a clerk." "You are a hero," Ellie said, from the doorway. "Now, rest. That is an order from your doctor." Life began to find its new rhythm, measured by the rising and falling of the river, which was now flowing clean and strong. Maria and Rosa, their old cantina stained with the memory of the fight, did not reopen. They tore it down. In its place, with the help of the miners, they built a new one. It was clean and bright, with large windows that faced the east. They painted a sign over the door Sunrise. It was not just a bar. It was the town hall. It was where the new River Council met every week. Dr. Eleanor Hart, her license officially and apologetically reinstated by Judge Wright, did not go to Santa Fe. She found a spot of land, a high, flat place near the sacred spring, with a view of the river. The community, in a single, massive effort, built her clinic. It was a solid adobe building, with 2 rooms. One was the infirmary, with 2 cots, shelves for her new, arriving supplies, and a clean, scrubbable floor. The other room was a school. She did not work alone. She hired Rosa, whose quick mind and gentle hands made her a natural healer. And she hired Taza's younger sister, a shy girl named Sheila, whom she was teaching to read English, and who, in turn, was teaching Ellie the Apache words for the herbs that grew on the mesa. Nada was not just a warrior. He was now, officially, a liaison. He was paid a salary by the district court. He was the bridge between the judge, the new River Council, and the Apache. He was, as Taza joked, a man of paper. But he was also a man of the people. He sat at the meetings in the Sunrise Cantina. Ellie watched him, his face serious, as he and Juan and Maria and Marshal Cole drew a new map of the valley. This was not a map of property lines, but of water access. They planned a series of small, community-dug channels, a system that would bring water to the miners' gardens, the town well, and the Apache cornfields. "We must," Juan said in Spanish, "ensure the miners have the first right in the dry season." Nate, who had been studying, his lips moving, replied, his voice halting, "Yo, entiendo, but the river." He switched to English. "It must be allowed to feed the cottonwoods, for all." Juan looked at him, surprised. He smiled, a slow, broad smile. "Si, hermano, for all." He slapped Nate on the back. "You must learn faster." "Nada. My Spanish is not pretty." "My Apache," Nate replied, "is worse." They were healing, the land and the people. But the scars remained. Ellie's arm was a long, puckered, silver line. She would never have full feeling in her left hand again. Nate's shoulder was a knot of old and new pain, a map of his own battles. They found their moments in the quiet of the evenings, the slow path. One night, as the air was turning cool with the promise of the real rains, he found her sitting on the porch of her new, unfinished clinic. He said nothing, but sat beside her. The gap between them, which had once been a chasm of culture and suspicion, was now a comfortable, silent space. He held something in his hand. He uncurled his fingers. It was a small, spiky plant, its roots wrapped in a damp cloth. "It is yucca," he said. "I know," she said, smiling. "For soap." "For soap," he agreed. "And for rope, and for the basket, and it grows slow. But its roots, they are strong. They hold the earth together." She looked at the plant, then at him. "I like slow," she said, her voice soft. "I feel as if I have been running my entire life, from my home to my school to here. I am done running." "I, too," he said. He looked at his hands. "I have been a runner, a chaser, a warrior. It is a fast life." "But you promised," she whispered, "to slow at sunrise." He looked at her, and his eyes, which had always held the hardness of the desert, were soft in the twilight. "The house. We need a house, not just a clinic." "A house," she agreed, her heart a warm, steady beat. "Adobe," he said. "Here, next to the clinic, so you do not have to walk far. And a garden," she added, "for herbs, and for this." She took the yucca plant from his hand. "We can plant it, just there." "It will need water," he said. "We have water," she replied. They sat for a long time, the silence full of plans. A house, a garden, a life. It was a promise, made not with grand words, but with the practical, small details of building a home where they could be present, for each other, and for the land they had saved. The rains came, not as a flood, but as a blessing. The dry, cracked earth drank. The river, which had been a thin, brown line, swelled and ran clear and blue. The community declared a festival of the first rain. It was not a somber affair. It was loud. It was joyous. Juan and his cousins brought out their guitars. Taza and the Apache men brought their drums. They did not play separate songs. They found a new rhythm, a beat that was both Spanish and Apache, a wild, strange, and beautiful music that filled the canyon. Maria and Rosa provided food. The women from the town brought pies. The Apache women brought roasted corn. Ellie stood, her clinic finished behind her, watching. She saw Marshal Cole, his badge shining, tapping his foot, a small smile on his face. She saw his leg in a proper splint, sitting like a king, watching the children. The children, they were everywhere. The boy whose arm she had set, now fully healed, was chasing a small dog. Sheila, her new assistant, was teaching a group of miners' children a game, their laughter high and bright, echoing off the wet rocks. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, of creosote and pinon, the perfume of the desert coming alive. Nate came to stand beside her. He was not wearing his warrior's buckskin. He was wearing a simple cotton shirt, his eagle feather still tied at his neck, but now a small, faded strip of white bandage, the one from her arm, was tied with it. He said nothing. He just held out his hand. She took it. His hand was warm, strong. Her hand, with its silver scar, fit perfectly inside it. They did not join the dance. They did not need to. They stood together and watched the life they had fought for, the life they were building, one slow sunrise at a time. The passage of a season is a powerful thing in the high desert. After the storm, the land did not just recover, it was reborn. The river, which had been a dying, angry thing, now ran full and clear. The flash flood had done its work, scouring the canyon of Vickers' pollution and Red Jack's dynamite scars. By the time the first snows dusted the high peaks, the new community-dug irrigation channels were full. Several months had passed. The winter was cold, but the community was strong. In the center of what was now, officially, the township of Sunrise, two new structures stood as testament to the new order. The first was the Sunrise Cantina, run by Maria and Rosa Delgado. It was loud, warm, and always full. On the wall, where a wanted poster might have hung, there was a new, large map. It was the water management plan, drawn by Nate, Juan, and Marshall Cole. It showed, in 3 different colors, the agreed-upon schedules for irrigation, ensuring the Apache cornfields, the Mexican gardens, and the town well all received their fair, measured share. Beside it, pinned to the wall, was the official charter. Marshall Cole had insisted on it. It was a single-page document, written in a clear, legal hand by Judge Wright, and signed by the heads of the New River Council. It was written in English, in Spanish, and, with Nate's careful translation, in the phonetic symbols of Apache. It was the first trilingual legal document in the territory's history. The second building was Dr. Eleanor Hart's clinic. It was, as promised, a solid, clean 2-room adobe building that smelled of fresh plaster and carbolic acid. The infirmary side was bright, its shelves stocked. Rosa Delgado, her new apprentice, had a quick, gentle touch and was already setting simple fractures. The other room was the school. It was here, every morning, that Ellie felt the deepest sense of her victory. She had 23 students. They were the children of miners, the children of the townswomen, and the children of the Apache. They sat together, a noisy, chaotic, beautiful mix, learning their letters. Sheila, her other assistant, moved between them, teaching the Apache words for the pictures in the English books, and the English words for the Apache games. The fish had returned to the river. The water was so clear you could see them. Silver flashes in the deep blue pools. The deer had come down from the high mesas, no longer afraid. The people, too, had healed, though the scars, like Ellie's, remained. Ellie had learned that slowing down was not an act of surrender. It was an act of profound choice. Her entire life had been a frantic race to prove herself, to earn her degree, to save the next patient. She had been running so fast she had not had time to build. Now, she was a builder. She had learned from Ha'a, who was fully recovered, that the slowest things, the growth of a yucca, the turning of a season, the building of trust, were the only things that truly lasted. Nada had changed as well. He was still a warrior. He still wore the eagle feather, a reminder of his sacred oath to the river. But his fight was no longer a solitary one. He sat in the council meetings, a man of paper and words as well as a man of the earth. He had feared that loving this woman, this white woman from the other world, would be a betrayal of his past. But he had learned that it was the opposite. She had not asked him to change. She had, instead, stood with him and bled with him to protect his traditions. Love did not dilute his heritage. It gave him a new, powerful reason to make sure that heritage survived. He had learned that his heart, like the river, was stronger when it was joined by a new stream. They had not had a ceremony. There were no rings, no vows before a preacher or a shaman. Their union was not a piece of paper. It was an adobe house. It stood next to the clinic, built by Nate's own hands, with the help of Juan and Taza. It was small, solid, and warm. Its windows faced the east. They found their moment in the pre-dawn cold. A few days before the winter solstice, a quiet had settled over the canyon. The children were asleep. The town was dark. Nate was awake. He always was at this hour. He stood at the new window, watching the stars fade. Ellie came up behind him, not making a sound. He had taught her that. She was in her nightdress, a simple cotton shift. She put her arms around him from behind, her small, scarred hand resting on his chest, over his heart. "You are awake," she whispered. "The sun is coming," he said. He turned, and she looked at him. His black hair was loose, falling over his shoulders. His face, in the thin blue light, was the most beautiful thing she had in her entire life. He reached up, his hand calloused and gentle, and touched the silver scar on her arm, a line that ran from her elbow to her wrist. He traced it, a question he no longer needed to ask. "It does not hurt," she said, answering it anyway. "Not anymore. It is just me." He looked at the amulet at his own neck. The eagle feather, his sacred oath, was tied with the faded white strip of her bandage. Tradition and care, a warrior and a healer. They were woven together, a new, stronger knot. "Sun Canyon," he said, his voice low. "Yes," she said. They did not need to say more. They dressed in the cold, pulling on warm coats and boots. They walked, their hands joined, through the silent town, past the sleeping cantina and up the high path. The path was safe now. It was wide. The rocks were clear. They walked, not as fugitives, but as owners. When they reached the high promontory, the place where she had first seen the smoke of Silver Ford, they stopped. The canyon was laid out below them, a vast, complex, beautiful map, silvered in the pre-dawn light. The river, their river, was a dark, peaceful ribbon below. They stood side by side, and they waited. "There are rumors," she said, her voice quiet. "Maria heard them. Another syndicate. From California. They are looking at the northern springs." Nate nodded. He had heard the rumors, too. He was not afraid. "Let them look," he said. "The land is not empty anymore. There is a marshal. There is a judge. And," he smiled, a small, rare smile, "there is a river council. The map is on the wall. The law is written." He looked at her, his dark eyes holding the coming light. "They will find we are organized. They will find we are ready." A single, brilliant, golden edge appeared over the far mountains. The first light of the new day. "Nate," she said, her voice so soft it was almost lost. "You said you would slow at sunrise." He turned to her. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs gentle on her cheekbones. He was not a man of many words. He was a man of a single, perfect vow. "We will be slow," he said. And it was a correction, a shared promise. This is the moment we choose, before the world wakes up, before the patients come, before the council meets. "We choose each other," she whispered, her hands coming up to cover his. "Before anything else," he affirmed. He leaned down and kissed her. It was not a kiss of fire, or desperation, or the end of the world. It was a kiss of beginning. It was slow. It was steady. It was as solid as the adobe house they had built, and as full of life as the river they had saved. The sun burst over the ridge, flooding the canyon with a clean, golden light. Far below, in the distance, they heard it, the low, steady thump, thump, thump of a single drum. It was not a call to war. It was Ha-Ah waking with the sun. His drum beat the daily, steady, peaceful pulse of the valley. Nate and Ellie stood, wrapped in each other's arms, bathed in the light. They had found their peace. We'll slow at every sunrise. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Please let me know in the comments. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to the Wild West Tales channel, like this video, and hit that hype button. It helps more than you know and ensures these stories can be heard by many more people.